Welcome back. Today we're talking about 6 weird sites that should not exist, but they do exist. Some of them are just absolutely incredible to look at, but some of them are complete disappointments. And so this is going to be a mixed bag. No one knows what's going to happen, and I've already got an echo before we even started. Let's get started, because what else are we going to do? This is going to be a fun one, believe me. This is really well planned. Did we start? I think we did start. This is Studio Fables, and this is one of the good sites. I hope it's going to be better than the bad sites, because I've already seen the bad sites and you will hate them completely. Again, as soon as we get started, the coolest thing that ever happens is they take a 3D model, make a video out of it, but essentially it's kind of rotating around and it's changing shapes, and it actually looks incredible. It does not mean anything, but it's one of those aesthetic elements that you'd put on a site, put on a hero, and it does end up giving you incredible looking results. At the top is a marquee tag with a bunch of relevant keywords and whatever they do, and I think I like the fact that they've truly changed your common layout enough for this site to actually stand out. If you actually want to see anything that they do, you kind of have to go over to selected projects, archives. Their navigation was essentially stuck at the bottom, and then you also get a 2-language changing option and also the chance to change to dark mode. Now, I have to say they've actually done a better job at dark mode than I expected, because sometimes sites will just change black to white, white to black, which is not dark mode. It ends up giving horrible results, and I hate sites for it. So I like the fact they've put in an effort to let there be a dark mode. And then you get 2 cards, because why would you not? These look incredible because they've taken a way of doing things, kept it consistent enough for things to actually look pretty. And they don't care about whether things are always vertical or horizontal, but as long as you get a specific kind of card working, I think it's actually one of the good things you can do. If you have both vertical and horizontal cards and you put them into one, making sure the width and everything is same, this is a rising trend now, and it actually does a lot of good instead of the same exact boring grid that we've been seeing over and over again. So especially with auto layout and the new changes Figma has done now, I think cards changing through UI before anything even reaches development is happening very, very quickly. And when you get to see that in real time, it's absolutely incredible. Although I do think this site is a little bit older than when Figma started with these changes, so kudos on the trendiness. What else is there to say? And at this point, you just keep on going, and I have no idea if this is ever going to stop. Did it start looping? What in the world happened? You get to the archives once again, a bunch of real simple case study project variations, and I'm just repeating what I've said over and over again, because this is exactly what we saw in every single live stream we've ever done in at least one site. At this point, 1 out of every 6 award sites very easily, because you've seen this happen, will have some sort of an archives or project section which is just simple lines, and then you can see actual images of what's happening with these projects when you try to hover over any one of these. And this is such a common pattern that at this point I'm not even surprised. I should be surprised, but this has been happening over and over again, and at this point, good job. the about section is a little bit more concerning, because A, no color, B, no images, C, what is that font? Are you just taking Arial, repeating it over and over again? The only thing that ever stood out with this entire UI was the hero section, and then when that went away very, very quickly, you just ended up with something that's pretty much very, very dull, which is the conflict with this site. You also have Lab and Studio Fables. Can we go back to the hero? It was very pretty, and I don't think you can scroll downwards other than this navigation, which is the way things are. The hero definitely sets you up to expectations that can't be matched with their actual projects and work, which is a bit of a disappointment, but also it's better packaging. So Studio Fables at the end of the day would be 6 out of 10 for me, because you have a very good packaging. This is the most intriguing hero we've ever seen ever on these live streams, and yet the content does not match it. So I think it's a mixed bag. The next site that we're talking about, thevariable.com, and this took a really long time to load. It went from 0 to 100 plain on color purple, and it was annoying. It was very annoying. And I am excited to see what happens when you actually stop waiting for 0 to 100. If I reload this, you're going to hate me. So now we have a really weird looking hero section, because on the one hand there is a lot of white space, on the other hand there is a weird SVG, I want to say, graphic that kind of stays in its place and cursor is hijacked, so you can kind of move things around, have a bunch of weird shapes appear out of nowhere, but also no one has any idea what's happening, so I'm confused as well. But I think they've done a good job with highlighting the right words, getting the right taglines in, getting the right text wherever it needs to go, and now you're at a place where things actually start to make a little bit of sense. The different agency, this is exactly what I talk about when I say the title should be highlighted, the elements should be out, showing off the parts that they need to show off. When you have two different fonts, or when you change some sort of color, when you change certain elements of a huge piece of text, I think life does become very, very easy, and they've done an incredible job at making that happen. You have a bunch of descriptions and elements and things that actually need to be there, and there is white space along with everything that needs to be there. So I think on the one hand, they put everything that you would need to put right here on the screen. On the other hand, it looks quite empty, because the amount of color that you'd need to have for something like this to be balanced is very, very small compared to the amount of color they've actually given us. This is like taking something really, really pretty and making it go grayscale. And I think they've gone grayscale because essentially when you're making a site that looks like this, you have no idea where to go other than white and black, and that isn't always such a great thing. I think changing colors here, having a little bit of life into this would have been a much better way of doing things, but that's just me. And then we get to see a weird video which runs from 3D cursor parallax, which is also incredible because it takes your position of the cursor and it kind of moves around according to it. You can play the video if you want to play the video. This is where things actually start to get interesting. Having an SVG curve that kind of goes in its own direction, animates as you come up, goes down when you're not animating. This is what would actually make your life much, much interesting. And when you have the active title change colors, when you let there be this much motion on a site of this scale, I think this is where things actually start to get very interesting. It's a shame that they've not highlighted or made anything easier to look at in the first paragraph, but at the end of the day, it's a site. It's a site. What can I say at this point? This is their next most impressive. I think this is where I have a certain theory about how this site came into existence, and it's quite interesting. Firstly, they started with the decision of making a site, put something that looked kind of like a fun SVG at the top, which you should, it's a hero section, and then every single section was made exactly in the order that it seems to be. So when you reach the end, when you reach the later sections of the site, that's when things actually start to look interesting, because sometimes when you're making a site that's huge, your skills improve as you're going down, and that's exactly what happens over and over again when you start to see things like this happen in the later sections, as opposed to what was supposed to happen in the second or third section. This is something that I would have wanted to see very early on because of the way they're doing things, and yet sometimes it just takes, when you're kind of planning things in order, it just kind of becomes the opposite of what the user would want to see, because users want to be impressed at the top, and then things can go downwards from there if they have to go down at all. But now they've started with the top, and things start to get more impressive as you go down, because whoever created this, skills improve as you kind of go down on a huge site. And I was talking about colors just before this, 2 sections ago. This is the section where they get their colors right. This is the section where they're actually highlighting the right parts of things. This is the section where you kind of are impressed with the overall dynamic that's going on over here, because as I was saying, their skills improved as they started to come down, and this is something I've been guilty of as well. But now I'm at a point where I'll start with maybe the less important sections, and then you can put in each section where it needs to go, because the way we're designing things and the way the user is using things are 2 very different situations, and you kind of need to design for that. So, and And then you reach the partnership section. Again, I have to say, on the one hand, this is very, very simple, but on the other hand, there was considerable animation going into when this grid started to come into existence, and things are looking better in the footer than they did in the header. So this footer for footers is ranking much higher than where their header was ranking for headers, even if they had a couple of fancy animations, because A, it's cleaner, B, you have deconstruction highlighting the important parts of typography wherever it needs to be, C, there is a bunch of white space because you need white space without clutter, which wasn't exactly the case in the hero section. D, there is color, so that makes things much more interesting to look at. And also they highlight what they need to highlight, they let there be images, they let there be color, and I think that's exactly where things start to fit in together, work really well together. So the only comment left to make on the variable.com is it was very evident how this site came into existence, and skills improved as we started to go downwards, but it shouldn't have happened. It's actually a shame, the fact that you'd have the bad sections up top comparatively, and then the good sections start to come down at the bottom, and that's exactly what's making me very weirded out with the way this site is made. The next site that we're talking about, desobis.agency. I have no idea what's going to happen, but let's hope it's good. As soon as we get started, I am hit with flashbacks of what used to be modern art inspired awards sites trend. So there was a time 2 years ago when you had a bunch of award sites all looking very deconstructed, all looking very, very weird around 2022, 2023, where everything was very modern art inspired, meaning there wasn't a lot of color. You would have white and black and things thrown into seemingly random positions just because you can, and that's exactly what started to happen with this site, and that's just my theory at this point. Although they've done a pretty good job at separating layouts, and they've kind of been a little bit more evolved than that, but you do get to see the old now trend of modern art-ish UI is starting to come into existence, and I think the site was made then, but they've updated it ever since, so that's a reminder if there ever needs to be one. The incredible part is they've made certain elements sticky, and they've let there be certain random things happen. The bad side is, as I said, this modern art trend that came into existence absolutely threw away the importance of any images, any color at all, and there was just a bunch of, when we talked about text, there was just a bunch of text thrown wherever you needed it thrown, and it became essentially very, very unreadable. But it was very new to the things that had been there pre-2022, and it started to be looked at like a pretty trend, but it went out of fashion very quickly. Not on this site, but on the web it went out of trend very, very quickly because it's very unreadable. Whoever will ever read something this dense? I'm not, and I don't know if anyone else is. And then they do try to highlight a couple of things, but I think color would have done a much better job at highlighting things, because black and white is already very dense where we're present, and I get the idea of having black and white be the two colors that can drive any site forward, complete anything at all, but when you get into the real world, sometimes it's actually good to have a couple of brand colors, because white and black will get in and get out of your memory so quickly that you're not standing out of anything anymore, and that's exactly the risk you run when you're making a site that's not like normal sites, that's a little bit more fancy. So many people are doing the exact same thing with black and white. You need to have some shade of color, and color lets you have so much more variation and so much more availability in terms of how creative you can go. So I think that's exactly where this site just tripped very, very quickly. Again, the good part is they've been very, very consistent with their major cards. They're launching what they need to launch, doing what they need to do very, very clearly, which is absolutely incredible to me. They've also repeated the same exact, I want to call it consistency, but it's really not that impressive, action of throwing a bunch of random text in here without much consideration to colors. And awards, at some point, the panel at awards loved these sites, and every single site that I've seen essentially for a very long time gets awarded by Awwwards.com. To my personal conflict, always had black, white, text thrown in to a point where it wasn't readable anymore. And I don't want to say awards at that point hated text, but it wasn't helping in the availability of text anywhere. Again, the footer animation is very, very cool. I would want to copy it at some point, because it does take a bunch of these variations, gets you in a slider, and it does a very, very cool job at animating things. And once again, I have to ask, was this footer also made after the header? And I think everyone's just going to say that's always the case, but this footer looks so much more impressive than the header. It's deconstructing layouts, it's making things a little bit more different than they're supposed to be, making the right things bigger, making elements stand out way more than they'd stand out usually, and even with the social media panel, they've done a pretty incredible job. So, on the one hand, I am still convinced they've done the hero before they've done the footer, which is a bad thing because their skills probably improved or their ideas started to actually flow by the time they reached footer, which is not good news because people don't start with your footer. No one sees the footer up front, but also they've done a good job. But I think the bad parts start coming in when you see a site like this and you know it needs color and it's just not present, and you know it's just going to be written off now simply because it doesn't have color. And any shade, even lemon green, would have been a good addition to something like this. This desperately needs color. It's just in front of our eyes. I have to give this a 5 out of 10, and I know I'm being very evil and cruel with all these weird ratings today, but I have to give this a 5 out of 10 because color would have made everyone's lives so much better, and it's just not present, and it makes me really, really sad. The next site that we're talking about, kaizen.makemepulse.something.com. Wow, I've completely forgotten how to read domain names at this point. Today we're talking about kaizen.makemepulse.com, a Make Me Pulse production. Click to start. Please let there not be audio. I hate when there's audio on sites. Sometimes it just makes... Are we muted? Yes, we are muted. Sometimes... This is going to be a weird story, isn't it? This is going to be a weird story. I think I've seen this before and I hated it when I saw it. Or I might have seen something very similar. Kaizen may be a story. Why don't they give us warnings before making stories? These sites get clumped together into normal sites, and then I spend 1/6 of a stream hating on it with the word that's... is going super fast. I can't even read it. That's cool, but how do I do that? How do I do what? Look deep within what? First act. Are we starting dramatic plays now? What's even the point of this? How can you have to hold to let the complete scene load. This is a pain because I don't have a mouse attached anymore because that made life complicated for a bunch of reasons, and I hate what is going on here. Why are we flying? What's curiosity? Just like the butterfly, I emerged from my whose story is this? This is the side that makes me uncomfortable. We're definitely going to have to edit this out, show it everywhere we can, because this site is what... I am very confused. Next act, how do we go to the end of the site? What's the story supposed to be? Am I missing stuff because I didn't open sounds? I don't know who has the copyright to the sounds, which is why I wouldn't want to have that be an element here. Second act, how do I get upstream, be bored? I have no idea what's happening anymore, and I think this is going to be 8 different variations of the same 3D renders, like a weird game, and it's going to be some sort of a story, and it's not going to end very well. And I'm trying to get through the second 3D model because apparently that might make our life a little bit easier to understand. But as far as this site is concerned, I am very confused at what is going on. I'm not going to continue this site. This is... wow, there is a lot of fun with the 3D renders, but I don't think this site is going to end, and the shame is they've not added any sort of navigation to tell us what's going to happen and when. Very weird. Very, very weird. Can we... I don't know what to do with this site anymore. I might add at some point a screen recording of this site basically never ending, but other than that, 2 out of 10. Very, very annoying. I am very annoyed today. This next site is very, very deceptive because on the one hand, it's a product by Dolce and Gabbana. You would expect a brand of that value to be very pretty and do incredible things, especially when they go to Awwwards.com, and they simply will not do that. So this is the gag lol side today, because your expectations are about to be changed. Simple image slider, maybe pretty imagery, but that's probably it. And then comes the true kicker. This is the part that you're going to not like very much. A bunch of text, incredibly small, breaking all WCAG guidelines. This is not accessible. I am pretty sure people might go blind reading this and still have to squint. Very, very, very weird. Putting a full scale image and then putting text on top of that image without any consideration to background color, drop shadows. This text will definitely get lost and also not get read. Another lol for accessibility. Then you get to this weird slider where one image is bigger than the others. I have no idea why. If you thought you saw every bad thing with accessibility, hold on to your hats. There is more violations to the world of accessibility. They try to give you white space, but the white space is so big, sometimes it takes the entirety of the screen, and I have this site on full screen, so I don't know why they give so much white space. The site looks like white space, and then there's content instead of website, and there's white space. It just reverses the dynamic. And once again, you have images. Once again, you have text that's incredibly small to look at. On the one hand, they take a product, make 4 perfectly colored variations of the same exact thing, and then on the other hand, this is a very annoying site. The footer search by city or passcode is so small, people would squint their eyes out. You can't read anything. And they tried to be original, but there is no animation, there is no major color change. The white space was essentially very weird because it was just white space and no content whatsoever. Very weird site, complete gag on absolutely everyone who was expecting more, including myself. One of the only reasons I have this other site here is because I was so annoyed by what it was. I had to share it with you because this is can anyone even read what's written in the footer? This is very, very small and you cannot read anything that's going on here. I have no idea why they would make things so small. Very weird. Sometimes people say the Apple site's navigation and stuff is very, very small, but they haven't seen this yet. Is this font size 2? Is this because I don't think it's font size 1. Font size 1 is just pixels. Is this font size 2? Because whatever this is, it's very small for normal humans. And lastly, we come to the site that was also in the thumbnail, but I have to talk about it because it actually looked quite incredible. It takes from your modern day 3D game dynamic and tries to cut it out, get it to a good point of making a site out of it. So, enter website. Let's see what happens. This is neoculture couture, and right off the bat, you're hit with, can we turn off sounds? Right off the bat, you're hit with them taking borders of a simple rectangle, cutting it out, chopping it off, making a version that actually looks really, really incredible. They get a bunch of elements right. Not only do they have a font, they make sure a couple of elements there are fancy. They let there be, is this Braille? I don't think it's Braille, but they let there be description and they let there be a 3D model and images and absolutely everything you need to have in a standard site. And it does take heavy inspiration from the 3D games that are just everywhere now, not on the web, but on the gaming side of things, and it does a very good job at making sure you get a huge piece of text, but also you get to read it in your own speed. So I think that kind of takes the load off of human eyes, and then you get to see more 3D models. I have no idea why they'd put 3D models for the future of fashion, but they have, and it actually works really well. Again, why would you have, I don't even know if this site is for anything at all. It seems like a major web experiment because most of these images are very, very random compared to fashion. Why would this be relevant to that industry? I have no idea. This probably is high-tech fashion, but also that's not visible. Why would you put high-tech building images at the top of everything? Very, very weird. But also, they've done a very good job at parallax. They've done a very good job at getting all the elements that you need to have right there in front of your eyes, getting all the elements that you need to have to work. And then you get a bunch of huge titles, but they do separate with parallax and they will give you good entry into any next section. Again, these cards are also taking a standard rectangle, cutting out the borders, making borders really, really pretty, and making things work really, really well, but also a weird couple of images. So I am very confused at where things are. Finally, we get to the footer, where they take the old 2024 trend of taking the name of the site, putting it in the footer, which was too long for this one, so they just put Unite as their primary tagline and just put it in the footer. But also the footer does look really, really cool. So at the end of it all, Neoculture Couture, 9 out of 10, because it does get every single element right, but also it's a little bit dull than I would have expected it to be, because the color scheme and the way they've just put things in front of your face is on the bleaker side of the spectrum. This has been an incredible site, an incredible live stream, if you don't count this one, which was a complete disappointment. Sorry, I don't like to badmouth things, but then I do badmouth things. So thank you so much for watching. This has been an incredible live stream. I will see you again tomorrow, 9 p.m. IST or 3:30 p.m. GMT. We'll talk about incredible sites once again. Good night.